Hey, I need some advice, but I guess it's more of a rant than anything at this point. My name's James, and I've been married to my wife, Jessica, for about 5 years now. Things have been pretty good, or so I thought. We've had our ups and downs, like every relationship does, but nothing that ever made me doubt her or the love we had. Or at least I didn't think it would. Jessica's always been the type to have a lot of friends. She's social, bubbly, and she works at a high-powered marketing firm in the city. I've always trusted her, maybe a little too much, I'll admit. There were always some little things that seemed off, but I brushed them off. You know, the way someone's phone is always face down, or the fact that she'd suddenly start making random excuses about needing to work late. I thought I was just being paranoid. Turns out I was just blind. Couple of months ago, things started to shift. I noticed she was spending less time at home, and when she was there, she seemed different. A little colder, more distant. I tried to talk to her about it, but she brushed me off like it was nothing. Her usual sweet demeanor was slipping away, and every time I tried to ask her what was going on, she'd get defensive or tell me I was being too clingy. Of course, she'd always come up with an excuse for why she couldn't make it to dinner or why she was too tired to do anything. It didn't make sense, but I let it slide. I tried to keep my cool, but a part of me kept feeling that something wasn't right. The vibe around her had shifted, and deep down, I knew that something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I trusted her, and I didn't want to be that guy who jumps to conclusions over nothing. But life has a funny way of revealing the truth when you least expect it. And trust me, I wasn't prepared for what was about to happen. Time passed, and my suspicions grew. I started noticing more and more little details that I had never paid attention to before. She had developed this new habit. She was constantly changing her phone passwords and social media logins. I didn't want to be that guy who snoops through his partner's things. But one night, everything changed. I came home earlier than usual one evening, feeling like something was off. I couldn't quite explain why, but I knew deep down that something wasn't right. When I walked into the apartment, I was hit with something I wasn't prepared for. Jessica had left her phone on the couch in the living room. It felt like an opportunity one couldn't pass up. I knew it wasn't the right thing to do, but I couldn't help myself. I picked up her phone, unlocked it because she had forgotten to lock it properly, and what I saw took me by surprise. There were several messages, but one stood out among them. It was from her colleague, Thomas, and it read, "Can't wait to see you tonight. You'll do it just as perfectly as always." The words seemed innocent enough at first glance, but in the context of everything that had been happening lately, my heart sank. I needed more proof. So, the next day I decided to follow her. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but I had a feeling I had to see it through. When she left the house, I followed her at a distance, and to my horror, I saw her walk into a restaurant with none other than Thomas, her boss. He was older than her, had an Italian accent, and always seemed to wear that smug grin. They sat in a corner booth, and although I couldn't hear their conversation, I could see everything. She laughed at his jokes, and I saw the way their eyes locked. It was something more than just a casual meeting. What I saw that day was enough to confirm it. I didn't know how to process what was happening, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. I didn't know how deep this went, but I knew now that my wife was having an affair. But that wasn't the worst part. I had to confront her. When Jessica came home that evening, I couldn't hold it in any longer. My heart was pounding in my chest, my hands shaking as I tried to gather my thoughts. But nothing could have prepared me for what was about to happen. She walked through the door, all smiles as usual, but I could tell something was off. The tension in the air was thick, and I wasn't about to play dumb anymore. "Jessica," I said, my voice tight with emotion. "We need to talk." She looked at me, confusion flickering across her face. "What's wrong, James?" she asked, her tone almost too calm, too practiced. It felt like she was already preparing a story, a cover-up. I didn't waste any time. "What were you doing with Thomas last night at that restaurant?" The words flew out of me before I could stop them. Her face froze for a second, just a fraction of a second, but I saw it, the hesitation. Then she quickly regained her composure and let out a laugh that felt forced, fake. What are you talking about? I was just having dinner with him. It's nothing, James. You're overreacting as usual. Nothing, I repeated, my voice rising. You looked pretty cozy, Jess. You and Thomas looked like more than just coworkers to me. My heart was racing, anger boiling under the surface. I couldn't believe she was trying to play it off like I didn't know exactly what was going on. Her expression turned defensive, almost annoyed. You know what? I can't even deal with this right now, she snapped. You're acting crazy. I don't have to explain myself to you. She crossed her arms, clearly trying to deflect. You're just insecure. You always were. I could feel my blood start to boil. The dismissiveness in her voice, the way she tried to twist everything around to make it seem like I was the one with the problem, it was infuriating. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, but I could feel the fury bubbling up inside me. You're sleeping with him, aren't you? I asked, the words cutting through the air like a knife. Her face went pale for a second, then flushed bright red. That's a low blow, James, she hissed. How dare you accuse me of something like that? I'm not some kind of cheater. God, why do you always have to make everything so dramatic? She was practically shouting now, her voice full of anger, but I could see the cracks forming in her facade. I followed you today, Jessica, I said quietly, the words heavy with meaning. I saw everything. Don't lie to me. I saw you with him. I know what's been going on. Her face went from defensive to absolutely furious in an instant. You followed me? She yelled. Are you serious? You snooped on me? You really think I'd do something like that? She looked disgusted, almost as if the very idea of being caught was the biggest insult to her. I can't believe you're making such a big deal over nothing. He's just a colleague. It's not like that. But I could see right through her. The anger wasn't because she was ashamed. It was because she was pissed off that I had caught her. I know what I saw, I said, trying to steady myself. You've been lying to me, Jessica, and I'm done being lied to. She rolled her eyes, clearly irritated. Oh my God, James, you're being so dramatic. It's not a big deal, okay? So what if I went out with him? It doesn't mean anything. I could feel my fists clenching. Don't lie to me. You've been having an affair with him. Don't even try to deny it. Jessica didn't even flinch. You really want to do this right now? You think you can just accuse me of cheating and I'll stand here and let you?
No, James.
I don't have to answer to you. Maybe you should focus on your own issues for once. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. It was like she was dismissing everything I had felt, every moment of doubt, every piece of evidence. She just shrugged it off as if I didn't matter. You really are a piece of work, aren't you? I muttered. She smirked, clearly not bothered. Maybe I am, but at least I'm honest about it. The weight of her words sank in, and I felt my world begin to crumble around me. Everything I thought I knew, every ounce of trust one had put into her, was a lie. And in that moment, I realized that this wasn't the woman I married. This wasn't someone who cared about me or our future. Jessica, I don't know who you are anymore, I said, my voice quieter now. I don't think I even want to know. But she didn't care. She turned and walked away, as if the conversation was over. She didn't feel guilty, didn't apologize. She just walked out of the room as if I didn't even exist. The realization hit me like a freight train. My wife had betrayed me in the most painful way possible, and she didn't even care. And in that moment, I knew I had to make a decision. I couldn't just let this go. I stood there, staring at the door she had just slammed behind her, my heart in pieces. I didn't know what to do next, but I knew this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning of the pain, and there was more to come. The days after that confrontation were the hardest of my life. I tried to keep my composure, but every time I looked at Jessica, I saw nothing but a stranger. A woman who had spent years lying to me, who had made me believe in something that wasn't real. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was her face, the smirk, the way she dismissed everything like it didn't matter, and I could still hear her words ringing in my ears. Maybe I am, but at least I'm honest about it. Honest, That wasn't honesty. That was arrogance. I spent a lot of time alone, just trying to make sense of it all. I went through the motions at work, but my mind was elsewhere, haunted by everything she'd said. I thought about the life we had built together, the years I'd spent believing in her, and now it all felt like a lie. I thought about how she had always made me feel like I was the one who was overreacting or being insecure whenever I questioned her. And now, here I was, confronting the worst betrayal imaginable, and she didn't even seem fazed. The pain was suffocating, and yet, there was this cold, burning anger building up inside me. I had spent so many years trying to be a good husband, trying to make her happy. I worked hard, sacrificed my own time and energy to build a life for us, and she was out there giving herself to another man without a second thought. It hurt more than I ever thought possible. I wanted to scream, but I also wanted to cry, to somehow let out all of this hurt. But when I looked at her, I saw nothing but indifference in her eyes. And that was the worst part. It wasn't even the affair itself, but the way she handled it. Like I wasn't worth the effort. She didn't care about me anymore. And that realization hit me like a ton of bricks. At night, I would lie awake in bed, unable to sleep. The silence between us was deafening. The bed, which used to be a place of comfort, now felt like a battlefield. I could feel her presence beside me, but it was like she wasn't even there. She would roll over and sleep, while I stared at the ceiling, counting the minutes as they ticked by. Felt like I was living in a nightmare that I couldn't escape from. The trust one had given her, the trust that we had built over years, was shattered, and there was no going back. But then, something else started to rise in me, a sense of clarity. It wasn't just anger or hurt anymore. It was a need for justice. I couldn't let this slide. Not like this. She didn't deserve to walk away without facing the consequences. I had to make her see what she had done, make her feel the weight of her actions. She had treated me like I was nothing, but I wouldn't let her get away with it. It wasn't just about her affair. It was about respect, about dignity, about the man I used to be before she took everything from me. I started to plan. I thought about my options for a long time. Divorce was the obvious choice, but honestly, the thought of it terrified me. I didn't want to break up our life, our home, but could I really live with someone who had no respect for me? Someone who had not only betrayed me but showed no remorse, no guilt? I wasn't sure, but I wasn't going to sit around and let her think she could get away with this. I started making some calls. First, I hired a lawyer. I didn't know exactly where this would go, but I wanted to be prepared. And as I met with him and started to learn more about my rights, something inside me clicked. I wasn't powerless. I didn't have to just sit back and let her trample over me. I had the ability to take control of my life again, to start over. And then there was the revenge part. I had been thinking about it constantly, letting the idea fester in my mind. She had humiliated me, and in my heart, I wanted her to feel the same way. I knew revenge wouldn't fix anything, but damn, it felt like the only thing that would make her understand the weight of what she had done. I wasn't going to play nice anymore. I wasn't going to beg her for an apology or explain how much I hurt. I wasn't going to sit there like some fool while she treated me like I didn't matter. She had crossed a line that couldn't be undone, and I was done being the man who just took it. I thought about how I could make her feel the hurt she had caused me, without doing something reckless. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that revenge didn't have to be as dramatic as I once imagined. I didn't need to do anything wild or crazy. It was simple, really. I was going to take everything from her that she had taken from me. The more I stewed on it, the more I felt like I was starting to take my life back. I wasn't sure what the future would hold, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let her win. This was just the beginning, and I wasn't going to be the victim anymore. The tension between Jessica and me continued to grow. I couldn't even look at her without feeling sick to my stomach. Every time she would walk into the room, I would get this gut-wrenching feeling, like my whole body was rejecting the very thought of her. But I still didn't know exactly how far this affair had gone. It wasn't just the dinner. Was it more than that? How long had this been happening behind my back? Then it happened. I had gone out one evening to clear my head, trying to get some air and put everything into perspective. But when I returned home a few hours later, I caught something I wasn't ready for. I opened the door quietly and stepped inside. I froze. There, on the couch in the dim light of the living room, Jessica was sitting with Thomas. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. He was leaning in close to her, his hand casually resting on her leg as they laughed. I wanted to scream, but I just stood there, frozen. It felt like time had stopped, like I was stuck in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I watched them, my heart hammering in my chest, as they whispered to each other. And then, Thomas leaned in even closer, whispering something into her ear. Jessica responded with a laugh, and I saw it, her hand on his chest. The way her fingers lingered there. It wasn't just innocent touching. It was intimate, far beyond anything I had ever seen her do in front of me. I wanted to charge in there, confront them both, but I stood still. My anger was boiling over, but I needed to know how far this had gone. I needed confirmation that this wasn't just some workplace friendship or a misunderstanding. Then, as if on cue, Thomas stood up and kissed Jessica on the lips. I don't think she was expecting me to walk in. She froze for a moment, her eyes wide with shock. But Thomas didn't seem fazed. He pulled away and shot her a quick grin, then turned and walked toward the door, giving me a passing glance as if he had no clue who I was. I had no words.
No thoughts.
All I could do was watch as he left through the door and into the night, leaving me standing there, seething. Jessica stood up and tried to act like nothing happened. She walked past me, avoiding eye contact, but I caught her smirking to herself. Smirking, as if I didn't matter. As if none of this meant a thing to her. She thought she could play me like a fool. And in that moment, something snapped inside me. I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't want to keep playing nice. I didn't want to be the guy who would just sit around and wait for her to apologize or come back with some pathetic excuse. This wasn't just an affair anymore. This was her showing me over and over that she didn't care. She didn't care about me, our marriage, or anything we had built together. I decided I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. She wasn't just going to break my heart and think she could get away with it. The next day, I made a plan. It was time to make her feel the way I did, betrayed, humiliated, worthless. I knew I didn't want to be married to her anymore, but before I left, I was going to make sure she understood the impact of her actions. I started by moving some of my things out of the house. Slowly but deliberately. I didn't say a word to her. Every time she'd ask what I was doing, I'd simply shrug it off and continue. I wanted her to feel the weight of my silence, to feel the absence of someone she thought would always be there. Then I did something that felt strangely satisfying. I called up Thomas's wife. Yes, the same Thomas who had been sneaking around with my wife, and told her everything. I didn't leave out a single detail. I described how her husband had been at my house, how he had kissed my wife, how they'd been sneaking around for months. I could hear her gasping on the other end of the phone, but I didn't feel sorry for her. I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. That evening, as Jessica walked into the living room, she looked at me, expecting me to say something. She probably thought I was going to beg her, apologize for being too controlling or too suspicious. But I didn't say a word. I simply handed her the phone. "You should probably talk to Thomas's wife," I said coldly. Her face turned pale as she took the phone from me, the color draining from her face as she realized what I had done. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. "James, what did you do?" she stammered, finally finding her voice. "I did exactly what you deserved," I said, my voice low but firm. "I wanted you to know that I'm not the only one you've hurt." I watched her crumble. The woman who had thought she could walk all over me now had the same coldness that I had felt in her for so long. But it wasn't satisfaction that filled me now. It was closure. I didn't need her to apologize anymore. I didn't need her to explain anything. She had shown me who she was, and now I was showing her who I could be. I left. I didn't need to pack everything up. I just took what I needed and walked out of that house. There was no dramatic confrontation, no last words. I didn't need that. I didn't need her. The divorce papers were filed within a week. She tried to reach out, but I ignored her calls, her messages, everything. I was done. I had moved on. But the part of me that had been so devastated by her betrayal didn't just disappear. The emotional scars are still there. I'll never forget the way she made me feel, how she treated me like I was nothing, and how she didn't even care. I learned a lot about myself in those dark weeks after everything fell apart. I realized that I wasn't just some guy who would accept being treated like dirt. I had to rebuild myself. And I did. Looking back, I can't say that I'm happy about the way things turned out, but I know that I made the right decision. Sometimes the hardest thing you'll ever do is walk away from someone you loved, but sometimes it's the only choice. You can't stay in a relationship where you're constantly being disrespected and betrayed. If anyone reading this is going through something similar, my advice is simple. Don't settle for someone who doesn't value you. Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't matter. If they cheat, if they lie, if they betray you, don't wait around for them to change. Trust me, they won't. Take control of your life again, no matter how painful it is. You deserve better than that. And remember, revenge might not heal the wounds, but sometimes, making them face the consequences is the only way to take your power back.